Now, it is the third Monday in February, and for the uninitiated, that is the day when the US celebrates President's Day. Of course, there's a new president, but the current leader has continued to ruffle feathers, which will come as no surprise to many of you, including with some of America's closest allies. Some observers see it as the latest attempt by Donald Trump to see how far he can push the powers of his office. And I'm very happy to say our American in Oz, Sarah James, joins us now in the studio. Sarah, good morning.
Good morning.
Can we
get to all of this in a minute, won't we? But we need to talk a bit of Australian sporting news.
Yeah, the Canberra Raiders in particular. No.
We want to set us up there, didn't
yes, you really
Absolutely.
did. OK, so is that the way to Donald Trump's heart, to go on a breakfast on Fox and Friends in the morning and say, hey, come to our sporting event, come to the NRL in Vegas. You love Vegas. Let's do it.
Let me just say to anybody who wants to get to Donald Trump, that is exactly the way to do it. This is a transactional president. This is a president who likes personal asks and reach outs. And it's also a presidency where there's been love for Australia in the past. So I think that's actually a super smart strategy, and we'll see what happens. He also likes sport.
Pete Hegseth came from Fox and Friends, I think, initially, or at least he used to appear there pretty often.
There are no shortage of people in the current administration who either have been on television or could be. And that, of course, includes the president himself. So this is a president who really does appreciate that as well. But yes, to your point, I think the key thing that goes into all of this is a presidency that does things differently. And that goes from this kind of high-level interest in sporting events and going in that direction to more broadly trying to reshape the office in terms of what the president can do and where exactly are those limits of executive power. And to be clear, Congress has been kind of handing over large swaths of powers for decades now. But this is the presidency that is trying more than any other in recent memory, and plenty of others have tried, to really stretch it to the max. And that is going straight to the U.S. Supreme Court. There is one fellow who's lost his job. His name isn't going to be familiar to anybody, but he's the head of the whistleblowers agency. So that's going to be the canary in the coal mine, so to speak, the first test where this administration goes to the U.S. Supreme Court and says, hey, we have the right to fire this guy if we want. And the person in that position says, no, you don't, because there's no cause, and I'm the head of the whistleblowers, and you can't do that. And that case right now is with the United States Supreme Court. So that's a first test.
So all of these executive orders that the president is making and the limits that might be being stretched in terms of what's precedent, what we've seen in previous administrations, is leading some people to question whether there could be a constitutional crisis. That's being spoken about a little bit. I mean, I haven't seen a definitive view out there, but certainly some journalists are exploring that idea.
Yeah, for sure. And I think constitutional scholars are starting to weigh in. I mean, we're in early days. We're literally within the first month of this administration, but also in terms of exactly how far this gets pushed, exactly what those limits are. To that point, you did see quite a lot of drama in New York, in the Southern District of New York. 7 prosecutors just quitting, and very high profile, and some with very stellar conservative credentials, over being asked to drop charges against the mayor of New York, Eric Adams. And the reason for that, they say, is because they believe this is a quid pro quo so that the mayor would assist more with some immigration, detention, and other policies that the Trump administration wants. Now, the Trump administration says that's not behind it. But to your point, exactly, that's one of the examples where it is being tested right now. So we've said this before in this program, but the law is one way in which how far can you go is going to be tested. That's ultimately the way it's tested in the United States. And lawyers are very busy right now. But it's also true that this is a presidency that's testing this on the international stage with NATO, with allies, etc.
So let's pick up with NATO, because previous presidents have got quite cross with European leaders, saying, pay your own way. I mean, Barack Obama did it, George Bush definitely did it, calling for certain mandatory spending. Donald Trump's taking that to a new level, though, and he's sort of causing this uncertainty because he seems to be cutting them out, particularly when it comes to Ukraine at the moment. So there's sort of an interesting dynamic at play.
And make no mistake, this president in his first term in office also said you're not paying your way, and European leaders were meeting in Paris today because they were so dismayed by some of the comments made by Vice President Vance and also by Defense Secretary Hegseth. So they're having their own meeting. And yes, they are frustrated about that, while Marco Rubio is in Saudi Arabia, and indeed there are going to be meetings between the United States and Russia. And the Ukrainian leader, Zelensky, is also speaking out forcefully, saying, how do you do this without us at the table? And by the way, we sit in the center of Europe, so why isn't Europe part of these talks? But I'm going to go back to the point one, which is this is a presidency that this president is going to do things differently. And I think a whole lot of traditional expectations about what might happen, where it might happen, and who's going to be doing what, those have all been upended. There is a bit, and this is what happens when there's such dramatic change. The American people are looking at this and saying, either on the one side, we voted for this. This is exactly what we wanted. That's about 49%, and that's an aggregate of polls, versus the other side, we expected this and we don't want this. And I think that's rippling out around the world.
Going to continue to see these tensions, Sarah James. It's always great to talk to you. Thanks so much.